You'll see the officer from the township roll up and start firing on the suspect, and you see next to him is a man in a suit who has his pistol drawn, aimed at the suspect, but he doesn't fire. If you're watching this, please, I am not slamming you. We're looking at this so we don't make the same mistakes again. If you find yourself in a similar situation, welcome, Christian Warriors. My name is Keith. We're going to do a debrief of the LDS active shooter incident, probably a good 8 or 9 days ago in Michigan. Now, if you want the written debrief of this with all the footnotes and references, head over to ChristianWarriorTraining.com. You can subscribe for free. If you want to support my mission and what I'm doing here, a paid subscription helps me bring this information to churches that can't afford it. There, you'll find the full debrief. In that debrief, after each section is a footnote where you can go to the link to go verify the information, look at it. Cultivated all this information from 2 sources. It's come from official law enforcement statements and information put out by their public information officers and their command staff. It's also come from press information where they've done interviews with people on scene. But it's important to note that the LDS Church has not done a debrief, but I think this information is pretty accurate about what's happened. Before we begin, there are some people in the church security community that are upset that I'm doing debriefs so soon after an incident happens. But those people are uninformed and have never had a job where their job is to protect people, to be in a combat environment, and they need to debrief stuff immediately so that they don't make mistakes again. To be clear, in any incident, you're going to make mistakes. Okay, you're never going to have 100%. If you have 100%, man, that was because God made it to be 100%. In almost every incident, mistakes are made. We have to identify those so we can change policy and we can make sure that our training reflects what is happening in the real world. So for those of you that are upset about that, I'm sorry you're upset, but I'm going to continue doing debriefs because I think they're super important. Quick overview of what occurred. Sunday before last, hundreds of congregants were worshiping inside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints meeting house on McCandless Road in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan, when a man rammed his pickup truck into the front of the building. The attacker climbed out from his truck carrying a semi-automatic rifle, shot at worshipers, and deliberately poured gasoline inside the building and set it on fire. Now, responding officers from the Grand Blanc Township Police and the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, which is basically Fish and Game, quickly confronted and killed the gunman. Now, before we begin, let's talk about what an LDS meeting house is. For the Christians, it's just a church where they hold their service. There could be multiple wards, which is groups of people that might go to the same church building, to the same meeting house, and it's basically your weekly worship space that they go to. Now, it's also important to note, and I documented this in another video, that since August 2019, the LDS Church has prohibited firearms in its meeting houses, except for current sworn law enforcement officers only. Now, I've heard from many LDS members since this occurred, and we've picked up a ton of LDS members onto the channel within the last couple of weeks. And I want to say welcome. Everybody is welcome here to learn to protect their church. Now, most congregations don't maintain a formal safety ministry, which I find ironic that you don't have a safety ministry at the meeting house, but the people in Salt Lake City are protected by professionally trained and full-time safety teams. But I digress. That if you're LDS, you should be enraged. Now, I've heard from a lot of you that you do carry anyways, and some of you created informal safety ministries within your meeting house. And I got to tell you that is, you have to do what you have to do, but you've got to have a formal safety ministry that is trained. But we'll talk about that in the debrief later on. But I just want to talk about that firearms ban, that they have that, and they have no formal safety ministry. They have a safety plan, but that safety plan, it was in 2019, they had that memo that said no more firearms. And then they talked about what to do in an active shooter. In an active shooter, they want you to run, hide, fight. And if at the fight section, it says use any weapon you can find, but you just disarm them. So now they're stuck with throwing chairs at somebody shooting at them. Now, in this incident, before we begin the timeline, this was a dual tactic attack. He rammed his vehicle. Actually, it's a triple tactic, to be honest. He rammed his vehicle into the building, and I've been warning you about vehicle ramming attacks. Those are becoming more popular. I think you're going to see that as a very common tactic here in the future. He poured gasoline, lit it on fire, and started shooting people. So you kind of got that triple attack going on. I think you're going to see more sophisticated attacks like that coming in the near future. So you need to start putting that in your scenarios. It's pretty complicated attack to fend off. Even if you have a full-time safety ministry, you're going to need, to be honest, to fend off this guy, you're going to need long guns on your team. And we have started to help you with that. We're starting to help you implement long gun programs at your church. We have policy, and we wrote an article on it, christianwarriortraining.com. Just look up AR-15 in the search bar, and you should be able to find that article pretty quickly. Now let's talk about the day of the attack. Again, it was a week before last Sunday. First call came at 10:25 a.m.
We have an active shooter at the church, and PD's on scene saying the building is also on fire.
Congregants called 911 when a silver pickup truck rammed through the front doors of the LDS meeting house, knocking down pews, injuring people near the entrance. Witnesses reported seeing the driver jump out with a semi-automatic rifle and open fire. At 10:27 and 46 seconds. So that is 2 minutes later, the first officer arrived. It was a Michigan DNR conservation officer, which I've trained those guys before. I did a class at the Michigan State Police Academy. They were in attendance. They are police officers. They're armed. They just do fish and game code. So he heard the dispatch call. It's not his jurisdiction. It's not his call to go to, but he heard it, and he arrived on that scene in less than 2 minutes after the first call. Now, he observed smoke and flames pouring from the building and engaged the gunman. At 10:27 and 59 seconds, which is about 15 seconds after the DNR officer arrived, that's 2 minutes after the first call came in. I mean, that's an unreal time. For all the cops that are listening, you know that was super quick. The first Grand Blanc Township police officer arrived. Now, the township police officer was wearing a body cam. And in fact, let's watch the body cam footage right now so you can see how that developed for him.
This shot's being fired inside. South end of the building, south end of the building.
Active shot, south end of the building.
I got your back there, man. Yeah, stay there.
Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
Shoot him!
Shoot him!
Get back! Get back!
Drop it! Drop it! Drop it now! Drop it! Drop it!
Drop the gun now!
Do it now! Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
Drop it!
No, drop the gun!
Now you can see the two officers advanced toward the gunman through the thick smoke, through the gunfire, and they fired about 10 shots combined, 2 rounds by the DNR officer, 8 by the township officer. The gunman fired at least 1 round at the officers. None of the officers were hit. The exchange lasted about 3 minutes, 43 seconds from the first 911 call. Now we're going to pause for a minute. I've heard from a few LDS members stating that a church member fired on the suspect, but I can't find any independent mention of this from the police department or media outlets. I do understand that might have come out in a podcast or some internal LDS media program, but I don't have that. So that doesn't mean it didn't happen. I just am unable to locate that in an independent mention. So just keep that in mind that there might have been some congregation member involvement in there. But I do want to point out this video. You'll see the officer from the township roll up and start firing on the suspect. And you see next to him is a man in a suit who has his pistol drawn, aimed at the suspect, but he doesn't fire. If you're watching this, please, I am not slamming you. We're looking at this so we don't make the same mistakes again. If you find yourself in a similar situation, just know that the officer has no idea who you are. And the officer that arrives can have great discernment and realize, like, here, your gun is pointed towards the suspect and you're not trying to actively shoot the cop, so he's probably not worried about it too much. Or he might have tunnel vision and not even see you, and then all of a sudden see you with a handgun and think now you're a second attacker and start shooting at you. Before everybody jumps on the comment bandwagon, I want to mention Officer Willie Wilkins from the Oakland Police Department. He was on my county drug task force. As many of you know, I was a longtime narcotics detective. He was killed by people from his own department as he was taking a carjacker out at gunpoint. We can agree that an armed carjacker needs to be taken out at gunpoint, but we had a rule in narcotics that when we're in plain clothes, we don't take enforcement action because we don't want to get killed by our fellow officers, because how do they know who we are? We're in plain clothes. Who knows? The officers that shot him were not wrong. Willie wasn't really wrong either. We wish that he did not take that guy out at gunpoint, but that's what happened. And I want you to realize, by you coming out in your suit and engaging, he doesn't even shoot, so there was no need for you to do that. You're putting yourself at risk, and then if you get shot by the officer's not wrong, and now that officer has to live with that for the rest of his life, and so now that life is ruined too. You guys really need to work on your active shooter training and what you're going to do when the police arrive. Like if you're actively in a gunfight with that guy, you got to keep stopping. You got to shoot him to stop him. I get it. Okay. And you have to yell out, "Church security, I'm church security." And then, the suspect is there. So the officer clearly knows what you're doing. Okay. You're kind of coming to back up the officer. Ask permission. So I've been in that position before where here in Idaho, I looked at a murdering cop. I'm like, "Do you need help?" And he kind of looked at me funny. And I was like, "I'm a retired police officer. Do you need help?" "Yes." And I jumped in and used force to help the officer stop the suspect. You're going to need to do the same thing. So here, say, "I'm a congregant. I'm church security. Can I help you?" And he'll say yes or no. He'll probably say yes, but at least he knows who you are. So how you're going to deal with, there are people that have never served in a capacity where you're in plain clothes and taking people out at gunpoint that will go into the comments and tell you what they think should be done. I spent at least 15 years in plainclothes assignments dealing with high-risk incidents. My best advice to you, don't run up next to a cop with your gun out. I have been in a position where I am in plain clothes, taking somebody out at gunpoint, and the cops are rolling in hot, and I know that they don't know I'm a cop. I have reholstered, put my hands up, and in that case, I'm a police officer. The last incident that comes to mind real quick is the cop just goes, "I know it, get back on gun." I'm like, "All right, back out," right? If you're standing there and you come up and you just start willy-nilly shooting, how does a cop know who you are? Not to belabor that point, but I think it's super important to look at this video and ask yourself, was that necessary? Well, in retrospect, it was not. I can tell you, I don't know what I would have done. I know I would have gone up and been like, "I'm a police officer, I'm church security, I'm whatever you are," and wait till you get an acknowledgement and then get in the fight. So that way, but the problem is now you got this DNR officer on the other side. He doesn't know who you are, and you might be shooting in his direction. You really got to think this out. And how you think it out is playing it out in scenarios beforehand so that you make an educated decision later on down the road. The other thing that I want to bring up is you have a DNR officer, you have a city police officer, and then now you're putting it in there. The two officers, I don't know if they can talk to each other. The DNR officer may have been listening, scanning the channel. He may have had a scanner and listening on the scanner app because he's driving through the city and wants to know what's going on. And that township cop rolling up may not even have known that guy was even on scene because they don't work for the same department. And so now they've got to work out deconfliction with each other. And then now you're running up in a suit and you don't even shoot to begin with. And that's what I found with most concealed carriers is they don't shoot when they should because they haven't practiced. They haven't planned it out. They throw a gun in the car and, well, it's there if I need it. But you don't train. You don't go through force options training. And what I have found is that concealed carriers just don't engage. And lastly, I don't know if this guy was running to his car to go get the gun because the church, the LDS Church, disarmed him from carrying a gun inside. And so now you're making him run to his car to go get his gun when he could have had it inside, shot the guy, stopped him, and then saved a bunch of lives. This whole thing is horrible. At least the number of casualties is preventable, maybe not the actual shot. All right, so we left off in 27:59. We've got the two officers engaging in the gunfight and stopping the suspect. We're talking like 3 minutes and 43 seconds after the first call, they put him down. 10:29, gun is neutralized. Sorry, my mistake. 10:29 is when they put him down. That's 4 minutes after the initial call. Both officers shot the attacker, fatally wounding him, and it ends the shooting. From 10:30 to 10:40, you have evacuation and a fire response. So congregants smashed windows. They ushered children out while smoke filled the building. Many who could not find exit sheltered in classrooms or under pews. Fire crews from the township fire department and neighboring departments responded to extinguish the blaze. Now, it's important to note that the fire department can't start putting out the fire until the cops tell them, "Go ahead and move in, this scene is secure." That may be why they lost the building, was because there's a pause while they try to find out if there's a second guy, because you can't have the firemen coming in there and getting shot up. And it's better to lose the building. The cops are going to go in there into the burning building and they're going to go pull people out. And God bless our police officers that are doing things like that, because they don't have the training to deal with burning buildings and they don't have the equipment to go in there and deal with all the smoke and everything else. And so God bless those guys. And these cops, they did a wonderful job. Can we just stop for a minute? and just talk about these two cops and what a wonderful job they did. We want all of our officers to perform at that peak performance. So cops, if you're watching this, great job, man. Hopefully you're my prior students. That would make it even better. If you were, you know how to get a hold of me, call me. So the cops did a great job. We just have to say we're very grateful for them. If I was on scene, I would pause fire suppression. I would get people out, make sure there's not a second shooter, start debriefing on the way out. And then I would say, all right, go ahead and put the fire out. Again, it's better just to lose a building, because you can rebuild a building, but you can't give somebody their life back if they're shot or they get crippled or whatever happens. So that may have just something to keep in mind with that. All right, let's talk about the aftermath real quick. 4 church members died, 8 others were injured. 5 of the injured suffered gunshot wounds. 3 were treated for smoke inhalation. Now, some of the law enforcement involved include that initial DNR, Department of Natural Resources officer, that initial Grand Blanc Township cop. You got Genesee County Sheriff's Office, Grand Blanc Township, Fire and Police, Michigan State Police, ATF, and the FBI. You will always hear on the news, the FBI is investigating. Okay, just stop. This is a Grand Blanc Township PD, or they maybe, I don't know how big they are. They might be too small and say, Genesee County, can you investigate it? Or it might be a joint investigation. But I'm telling you right now, it's a local investigation. Whatever the FBI does, that's FBI world. Now, they might help. The FBI does have an evidence response team, the ERT. And the ERT, they will respond if we call them for like murders and stuff like that, because they have phenomenal equipment and funding. And so they can get that really small DNA evidence and stuff like that. So like as an example with this, they have this thing called crash investigations called a total station. But basically it's a laser on a tripod, and lasers come down, scan the whole scene, and it does diagrams. Done. It's got everything. It's super quick. Old school cops remember taking a pencil and a piece of paper and drawing a 2-scale diagram. These guys will come out with lasers and have it done in a second. So that's the FBI involvement. They might look at it is like, was there anybody that was pushing this guy online to push him to do a shooting? And they still might be looking at that. Was there anybody that kind of gave him some outside assist, prompting, something like that? And the FBI might do a case on that, but the FBI is not prosecuting anything. They're just doing a parallel investigation, then it'll be done. They're providing some professional support for the local agency. But remember, it's being prosecuted at the local level. The ATF is there because they have a phenomenal, you guys know how I feel about the ATF, obviously. But they do have a phenomenal arson squad, and the arson investigation will be perfect. They can also look up information on that rifle super quick, where law enforcement, it takes forever. They can get these things done in like 4 hours versus 4 weeks for us. Let's talk about the fatalities. I think it's important to talk about the people that we lost. John Bond, he's 77. He was a U.S. Navy veteran. He served aboard submarines during the Vietnam War and later commanded a local VFW post. He was a golf enthusiast. He loved spending time with his family. And I got to tell you, submariners, you guys are a different breed, man. Craig Hayden, he's in his late 70s. He died helping others during the attack. His daughter said she looked into the attacker's eyes and forgave him. And that's going to be the hardest part for us, is to forgive somebody like this. That's what we do. We want the Lord to show us forgiveness like we forgive others. Pat Howard, he's a family man from Hawley. He was remembered for his kindness and devotion to his wife, Stephanie. Thelma Armstrong, she was a South African immigrant known for her selflessness in attending services with her daughter. She perished inside the burning building. Now, 8 people were injured. Benjamin Phelps and his young son both were shot. His son was later released from the hospital, while Phelps faced a long recovery. Greg McCat, he suffered life-threatening gunshot wounds while attempting to stop the attack. He remained in intensive care and underwent multiple surgeries. Jeff Kubia sustained a gunshot wound that shattered his ankle, requiring several surgeries and months of physical therapy. Marie Kubia, injured by glass shards in her hands and feet. Jared Hicken, he was an emergency medicine resident, shot in the arm. He later said he thought he would die, but still moved others to safety. His wife, Brandy Hicken, and their toddler daughter were also injured, though their conditions were not detailed. S. Bridger Frampton, he's another ER resident injured while re-entering the building several times to evacuate congregants. Now, several other congregants suffered smoke inhalation or minor cuts. Victims range in the age from 6 to 78 years old. I'm going to talk about the suspect. Many of you tell me that they love my debriefs, but they don't like how I mention the suspect. I have to. We're going to talk about, we're not giving him kudos by any stretch of the imagination. This person is evil. He's either crazy or demonically possessed. I do think that stuff like this, they're demonically possessed. But we have to mention who they are and what was going on in their life and how this came about, because what we're finding is that there were warning signs where we could have stopped. And if we don't talk about this, and other people, it's not going to raise a red flag somewhere down the road where when they run across an active shooter prior to them doing it, going, man, that's like the active shooter from LDS. Maybe I should call law enforcement, right? All right. So the suspect was Thomas Jacob Sanford, also known as Jake. He's a 40-year-old from Burton, Michigan. Now, he did express animosity towards the LDS faith. He lived with his mother and his stepfather, and he worked intermittently as a handyman. Now, friends said he previously lived in Jeremy Ranch, Utah, around 2010 and had convictions for impaired driving and traffic offenses. It does appear that he had a relationship with a devout LDS woman, but he was upset about them asking him to remove his tattoos and some other issues, and he moved back to Michigan. Now, the FBI confirmed that Sanford was a former U.S. Marine who served a tour in Iraq and received a Good Conduct Medal. Records showed he left the service more than a decade ago. Let's talk about his mental health. Acquaintances described him as increasingly isolated and obsessed with anti-LDS beliefs. Now, a woman who knew him said he previously drove his truck at her and her daughter while he was laughing. Now, according to friends cited by KPCW, his hatred toward the church intensified after that relationship with the LDS woman ended. He also complained to a city council candidate that church members wanted him to remove his tattoos and referenced temple sealing ceremonies, and he had issues with that. Now, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who is totally awesome, by the way, said the FBI learned that he hated people of the Mormon faith. Now, he has no official ties to the church. LDS has come out and said that he didn't have official ties. But we do have a city council candidate that told him he talked to Sanford the week before, and those LDS comments came out. Now, that city council candidate is Chris Johns. He said Sanford became unhinged when he began talking about the Mormon church. He complained that members wanted him to remove his tattoos, said that Sanford referred to Mormons as the Antichrist. Now, for the LDS people listening, I know you're going to go into the comments and say, please refer to us as LDS. I get that. I'm quoting what other people are saying, so bear with me. Now, investigators executed search warrants on Sanford's home, vehicles, and electronic devices. Now, they're doing that electronic devices because they want to see if he was acting with anybody else. So they're going to break into his phone, his computers, anything that has any memory storage, they're going to look into. I can tell you right now, wonderful evidence is found in those things. Now, as of this writing, authorities have not identified any co-conspirators or found evidence of other targets. It looks like he was a lone wolf. And I've been telling you, lone wolf attackers are the biggest thing that we need to worry about. Now, there is information that he went to a church a week before this attack, a Christian church, and had issues with them. This is not official. It is my understanding that there's information that he may have been looking at attacking area churches. Before you ask me which churches, because you're from that area, I don't have that information. I would press Grand Blanc Township Police to release that information so that you have that. I cannot confirm that officially, but that's what I understand. So it's out there for you to understand. The reason why I mentioned it, I think it's important to mention it, even though that's not confirmed from the PD, because a lot of you are like, well, he was just going after the LDS. No, the dude's crazy. Look, caught up in, he was a leftist, he was a MAGA, he was whatever. Look, man, these people change ideologies, religions, they change their minds and their ideas like the wind changes direction in wintertime. It will change constantly. So by saying that's another leftist or that's another, MAGA guy, or he hated LDS, he hated Jews, he hated Christians, it doesn't matter, man. There are active shooters that were a Jew one day, LDS the next, and now they're a Christian. They were Muslim one day, and now they're back to Christianity again. They are, again, we talked about demonically possessed people, whether they're demonically possessed or crazy. You cannot put a finger on crazy and say this for sure. People go, why did they do that? Because they're crazy or demonically possessed. You can't explain anything. It doesn't make sense. That's why they're crazy, right? I'm sorry, we're not supposed to say crazy anymore, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I need you to realize, because in the comments, people are like, it's Christian warrior training. Why are you talking about LDS or Muslim or whatever? Because if you're so dense that you can't see what happened over there, that it could happen to you, then you're in the wrong place. And you need to work on your discernment and critical thinking skills. Okay. This easily could have been the church that he lived next door to. It could have been the church that you're going to. Could have been one in California. Could have been one in New York. Could have been one in Texas. Could have been one in Idaho. You never know. What you need to do is bring your A game every single day. All right, let's talk about the implications and lessons for churches. First and foremost, you have to have a volunteer safety ministry. Now, currently, LDS prohibits firearms in its meeting houses and does not authorize local safety ministries. Their safety plan is horrible. If you're from Salt Lake City and you're from the main LDS command staff people and you're watching this, you are doing a horrible job. And I know you have enough money because you are the richest church in America to implement a safety team that protects your people. Come on, man. What are you waiting for? People died. Let's go. Luke 22:36. Jesus said, sell your cloak, buy a sword. Today's modern variation of that is go sell that expensive jacket you have and go buy a Glock. I'm reading Nehemiah in my Bible study right now. Nehemiah is rebuilding the walls. He's trying to protect Jerusalem. He's praying to God. He is the leader that we need right now to protect Jerusalem from attacks. In our Bible study today, we talked about the LDS Church and where's that lacking? There's nobody rebuilding the wall there. He just took away your tools to rebuild the wall and then said, God will provide. That is a disservice. God is going to take care of us. I'm writing an article right now that talks about for the people that say God are going to provide and then that's it. And just wait to be killed. I'm writing an article about that and it's disingenuous. Go back and read James and there's some important information about works and faith. They have exactly what to do with what we're talking about right now. And I'll stay tuned, subscribe, and I'll do a video on that later on down the road. But you cannot disarm your people. And there are churches that are doing that because I get calls from your churches where they say, we don't want concealed carriers in here. It should only be the safety ministry. Well, that's like saying only cops should have guns. I'm a 30-year cop. Look over the wall right here. I am a highly decorated 30-year cop. And I'm here to tell you, I want regular people that want to defend themselves with a firearm to have a firearm because we'd have less victims in the world. If you're a church that says disarm everybody, I mean, that's your prerogative. But I want you to go back to Luke 22:36, and I want you to go back and read Nehemiah. And I want you to tell me that that's the proper decision. You obviously are more educated than I am in the Bible. You probably have a theology degree. You've probably been a pastor for however long. And certainly you know the Bible better than I am. So why am I telling you to look at the verses that you already have a good understanding about? Let me know in the comments of whether I'm right or wrong. Before I come on, I always pray to the Lord and I ask him to help me speak. And I am not a theologian. I don't have a degree in theology and I don't believe I'm cherry picking verses. I believe some of you are though. And let me know, am I cherry picking verses? Be interesting to hear what you have to say. Next thing up, barriers against vehicle attacks. I have told you guys over and over again that you have to do something about vehicle barriers. Now, I went to a church in Northern Ireland in Belfast, right on the wall, just a couple of weeks ago. And I loved this church. It was a beautiful church and they had bollards all the way across so you could not ram a vehicle through the front. When the church was not in service, they actually sunk into the ground so that they're not worried about somebody ramming the front because there's nobody there. But when the service is there, bollards come up. We should learn to be this church. I walked right in, but the minute I walked in, there were people on me like, hey, how are you? Because they didn't recognize me and they wanted to make sure I wasn't somebody coming to cause harm. And I'm like, oh, I'm a tourist. I'm just here to look. And they're like, oh, come on in. And they gave me a tour. But everybody that came in that they didn't know, they were on them, right? We can protect our churches and still keep them open and welcoming. This church is in Belfast. The entire neighborhood around the church burned to the ground, but the church stayed up because they had great security. And we can learn a lot from churches in Belfast. All right, you need fire detection and suppression. But look, when a guy pours gasoline, I think this church had fire suppression in there. When you come in there and pour gasoline and then light it on fire and then shoot everybody up so the fire department can't come in and put the flames out, yeah, the fire suppression system isn't going to keep that down because you have an accelerant on the ground that is just keeping the fire going. It's just going to spread the gas everywhere. But you still need to have a fire suppression system and a fire alarm. All right, training and drills. You have got to practice active shooter and fire evacuation drills. You've got to constantly be drilling. I want you to train 4 hours, not on active shooter, not going to the range. You go to the range as a group at least once a year officially. You can go on your own with your group, but out of 12 months, you have a lot to train on. What's most likely going to happen is somebody's going to burn your church down, vandalize it, or burglarize it. So you need to work on those things first. Next up, sexual assault within the church. Your pastor is more likely to molest a child than for you to have an active shooter in your church. I want you to look at the LDS Church. How many sexual assault allegations have I mentioned in the last year regarding LDS, which they have the same amount we do, versus how many active shooters have they had? There's been more sexual assault issues. That's like every church. And so we've got to fight that sexual assault issue that's going on in the church. So we have to spend time on that. Then comes violence. And it's not just active shooter. It's domestic violence. It's crazy people coming in, disrupting the service. It's gang stabbings, gang shootings. It's all this other stuff. So we have to prepare for all of that. So you're going to end up practicing active shooter once a year. But you have to make it count. Bring everybody in and go over what you're going to do and how you're going to react to it. If your plan is to react on concealed carriers in the congregation, that is not going to work. I can tell you right now, Sulphur Springs, Texas, I did a conversation with Pastor Pomeroy. You can take a look at it here. Pastor Pomeroy, he is such a good man to come out and talk about what their plans were and what their plans weren't. Their plan was, hey, we have concealed carriers all over the church. We're Texas. They'll stop any active shooter. That didn't work because at least 20 people were killed and another 20 wounded. You've got to have organized security, practicing every month, 4 hours a month, working hard. You have to do threat assessment and reporting. Now, look, Sanford was ranting to a council candidate. If that council candidate came, I shouldn't say what he should do. I wish he would have gone to the LDS Church and said, hey, just a heads up, this guy's ranting about you guys. Then you have an intelligence officer on your safety ministry who takes that information and does open source intelligence or OSINT on him and does a deep dive and looks for anything. And then you post this picture to the safety ministry saying, be on the lookout for this guy. And then when you see him, you deal with him. There is a huge amount of anti-religious extremism going on right now, anti-Christian extremism. Now, in the 1900s, there was more persecution of Christians than any other time period in history. This century, it is looking like it's going to be worse than the last century. We're under more persecution than we've had before in history. And so I'm just going to stop for a minute and ask you, if you're not on a safety ministry, you're probably watching this because you have a servant heart. You have a heart of a warrior. And I have to ask, why are you not on a safety ministry? If your answer is because we don't have one, then make one. Start working on it. Okay. I have everything you need over at ChristianWarriorTraining.com. Go over there, get whatever you need to talk to your deacons, to talk to your pastor to make that happen. If your answer was, I'm busy, well, I bet you the people at the LDS Church that died were pretty busy too. And now they're not going to get to whatever it is they had. We need you. Step up to the plate. You're watching this because you have the heart of a warrior. You are a warrior, or you're a retired warrior. Get on board, go to your safety team, and either follow or lead them or help them or do something. Anytime that we talk about an issue like this, we talk about the Bible. And I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. And I kind of want to go a little bit more in depth into this. Now, in our biblical review, I want to talk about that 2019 memo from the LDS that prohibited firearms in organized safety ministries. Now, it urged members to trust in God's will, implying that human preparation was unnecessary. Now, this interpretation misses the biblical meaning of faith. Scripture teaches us that faith without action is dead. James 2:17 says, so also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. In verse 18, James adds, show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. So in other words, genuine faith produces obedience and preparation, not passivity. Now, I've hit Nehemiah 4:9, where it tells us that they prayed and set guard as protection. And I talked about Luke 22:36, to be prepared, even to carry a sword as a symbol of vigilance. Now, leaving safety entirely to God's will without taking any protective action misrepresents what Scripture teaches us about stewardship. God expects his people to use wisdom, train, and act when it's necessary. When a church establishes a safety ministry rooted in prayer and discernment, it isn't acting in fear. It's demonstrating living faith, the kind that James described, a faith proven by works done in obedience to God's call to protect his people. Now head over to ChristianWarriorTraining.com and get the full debrief. I would like you to share it with your elders. I would like you to share it with your pastor. And I would like you to share it with every Christian man and woman you know with a warrior heart. And I want you to ask them to join a safety team, form a safety team, help protect the church in some way. Dangerous times are coming because the Bible tells us those times are coming. I believe that they're here and we're living it right now. And many of you feel the same way. It's time to take action and be bold. Enough people have died. I want you to leave a comment for me. Let me know what you think of these debriefs. Tell me what you think of the information you learned. Did it help you? What do you want to see differently? Let me know. If you want to support what I'm doing, ChristianWarriorTraining.com, a paid subscription goes a long way, but it's not necessary. I will still get you what you need for free because I want to help you protect your church. When you leave here, I want you to pray for all the people that were affected by this horrible active shooter incident. I'd like you to pray for the 2 police officers that had to engage the suspect. They will live with this for the rest of their lives. I want you to pray for their healing and their overcoming all the horribleness that they saw that day. And the same with everybody else that was there that day. And I want you to remember your ABCs. Always be caring. Even if you're in an LDS church, carry.